All right, welcome to our quick review of the 5 themes of geography. You did get an article about this in class, so I am going to keep this kind of short and sweet and to the point, but a bunch of you asked me if I'd go through some of these. So let me go ahead and just run through them. What they are, literally, is location, regionalization, connection, human environment interaction, and place. Sometimes we call them slightly different things, but those are the key ideas. So when we talk about location, we split it into 2 major ideas: absolute location and relative location. And absolute location, the easiest way to remember this is that if I was looking at a map, I can put my finger on the map at a latitude and a longitude, and that is absolute location. Okay? Absolute location does not change. Does not change. Right? Doesn't matter what else is going on in the world, absolute location does not change. Relative location, on the other hand, does change. Okay? And relative location changes as buildings come up and buildings go down, as roads get put in, as your mental map of an area fills in. Right? So for instance, with Beamer, their relative location would be that we are in South Federal Way, Washington, by the Costco and the Lowe's, right? And that's a relative location. And so that's kind of the major split when we're talking about location. And then we also get into this idea of site. And site is in a lot of ways close to absolute location. Okay? And site are those physical factors of an area that don't change. Okay? It's the mountains, it's the lakes, things that either don't change or change very slowly over time. Regionalization, on the other hand, is the idea that you take a place and you look for some common traits, one or more common traits, and you use that as a way to subdivide that area. And so you group space according to these common traits. And there's really 3 major types of regions: a formal or a uniform region, and they have a shared trait that is evenly spread, that is uniformly spread across an area. Things like countries are formal regions. Okay, and the trait could be something political like government. It could be the Rocky Mountain region is a formal region because it's got that physical trait that we can kind of draw a line around. Okay, and it could be a cultural trait. It could be, for instance, French-speaking Africa or Belgian-speaking Europe. Right? These are formal regions. These are regions that we can draw a line around. Functional regions, on the other hand, or nodal regions, as they're oftentimes called, these are regions that have a center. I can put my finger on the center on a map of that region. They're often roughly circular, and they don't so much have a border as they kind of fade to unimportance. They're often based around some kind of a function, which is why we call them a functional region. Vernacular regions or perceptual regions differ from person to person, and these are the ones that are really hard to define. Right? So just to give you an example, for instance, the Pacific Northwest, since we're in Washington State, again, most people say Washington, Oregon, Idaho. Some people add Western Montana, the part with the Rocky Mountains in it, right? Some people add Northern California. I've seen definitions that include part or all of British Columbia. I've seen definitions that include Alaska as part of the Pacific Northwest. So they vary from person to person, and that's what makes them so different and so hard to define. We talk about connection. We're also talking about movement. Okay, and another way to say this in geography is to talk about the situation of a place. Okay, so how do places work together? How are Seattle and Tacoma linked? Right? How do they help each other out? How do places compete? Right? Seattle and Bellevue compete for businesses. Right? Does Amazon have their headquarters in Seattle, or do they have it in Bellevue? How do they make those decisions? And then also, what ways can places get into contact with other places? And this is where that idea of movement comes in. This is where we've got the roads, we've got Ports, airplanes, things of that nature. Okay? But how is one place connected to or linked into another place, and how do people move around to get from place to place? Human-environment interaction. This one is actually, you want it to be complicated, and it's not. It's really based around two key questions. How do we as people influence the environment, and how does the environment influence us? And there's two real theories around this. Okay, there's an old school one called determinism, and that basically says that what happens with the environment, what's available in the environment, that limits what the culture will develop and how well it will develop and how advanced it will be. Okay, it's determinism. We don't like that one anymore. We find that a little bit limiting. The one that's in vogue today is called possibilism. And possibilism says that, yes, the environment limits our choices in terms of what's available to use, but the environment does not determine those choices for us. Okay? Human ingenuity at the end of the day is the most important piece. And this is why, for instance, we can farm for almonds in Southern California, right? Because we can irrigate until we have enough water to grow. And that's possibilism. So in other words, people have the possibility of overcoming the limits the environment sets, and they can work around and with those limits. Place is really, it's how we make sense of our surroundings. It's how you and I organize space, right? And sense of place, that's the feelings that people imbue with a place. Okay? So if you go into a really nasty, gross part of town, you're going to have bad feelings about it. It's going to have a bad sense of place, right? If, on the other hand, you go into a city and it's clean and it's got beautiful tree-lined sidewalks and wonderful cafes and all kinds of stuff, that's going to have a very positive sense of place. And that sense of place just comes from, again, the feelings that you put on what you're seeing and where you're at. And so sense of place will vary a little bit from person to person, but overwhelmingly, it's almost kind of a shared experience. Okay? Place is also the things that make one place unique one space unique compared to another. Right? So if you're sitting in my classroom, part of what makes my classroom a unique place is we've got the huge world map mural on the wall, we've got quotes all over a bunch of the other walls, there's a billion different maps and things, right? That's what makes my room unique and a unique place. If, on the other hand, you go across the hallway and you go into Mr. Abrahamson's room, you're going to notice all of the pictures on the wall behind his desk. You might notice that he's got a big wall painted white and every window is covered to keep out the light, right? For his film class, he's got a green screen posted up on a different wall that his Titan TV kids can use. And that's what makes his room different from my room and makes it a unique place and a unique space. That is our lecture for the day. Our quick review of 5 themes of geography. If you have questions, of course, always feel free to come in and see me. I'd be delighted to help you out. And have a good evening.